can you keep your weight off and your insulin low when you eat sugar? Hi friends! If you have fat in your liver, elevated liver enzymes, high triglycerides, high ApoB cholesterol, or high blood sugars, then this top 10 liver video is for you. So I have here 4 of the 5 foods that we're going to talk about. So let's rapid fire through the to-do list in less than 1 minute. Target these 5 things to eat: Dioscorea alata, Chlorella Anthocyanin-rich fruits, Avena Sativa, and drink coffee. Improve these 3 metabolic parameters: lower blood sugar, lower triglycerides, lower your ApoB cholesterol, and avoid these 2 toxins: alcohol and fructose. The good news is these changes can reverse and cure fatty livers even if you've had a fatty liver for decades. The goal is to avoid scarring or fibrosis or basically liver cirrhosis. Now, there is no neutral food. Food either taxes your health or it benefits your health. And it's hard to know what it does unless you observe what happens to other people who either ate that food through clinical trials or who have been eating that food for centuries. So take the Okinawas in Japan. They eat Dioscorea alata, similar to this, which is number 1. And we know this as the purple sweet potato, but in reality, it's not even a sweet potato. It's actually a yam. Now, even the juice of the Okinawa sweet potatoes full of anthocyanins has been shown to reduce liver inflammation. But if you ate the whole purple sweet potato, or basically the purple yam, you would get the benefits of other nutrients like fiber and resistant starch, which are also important to improve the 3 metabolic parameters. Now, number 2 is Chlorella, which is a green algae that appears promising in the treatment of chronic hepatitis C. Now, what does fatty liver have to do with hepatitis C? Well, 70% of those with hepatitis C also have a fatty liver. There are over 3 million people in the United States living with hepatitis C, and 75% of them, they don't even know they have it. So if you've ever gotten a tattoo, body piercing, shared your toothbrush, your razor, or your nail clippers, then you are in the same high-risk category as these people. Now, 2 teaspoons of Chlorella was shown to boost the activity of natural killer immune cells, which could kill hepatitis C viruses. Of course, this is a small study. In America, we now have effective and well-tolerated prescription antivirals that has been shown to eradicate the hepatitis C virus in just a few weeks. So everyone over 18 years of age should get tested at least once in their lifetime for hepatitis C antibodies. And if you have antibodies, then you need a thorough workup and to see which regimen will work best to cure you. Now, number 3 is to eat anthocyanin-rich fruits. Now, I'm sure you have heard that fructose is bad for the liver. Fructose is bad for the liver. That is number 10, avoid fructose. But are you confused? I'm telling you to eat fruit, but then at the same time avoid fructose. How do you do that? Well, fructose in fruit, like this apple, may not even get absorbed, as the gut microbiomes in your gut can metabolize 3 to 5 grams of fructose. Now, how much fruit do you eat in a day? Now, I eat a ton because they are low calorie, high in fiber, high in antioxidants, and they are very hydrating and satiating foods. Now, unlike candy or desserts with added sugar like fructose or sucrose or honey, eating fruit doesn't overwhelm your gut with a flood of sugar because most of that fructose is trapped in fiber and water. Now, 1 cup of strawberries has just 7 grams of sugar, but weighs 144 grams worth of food. 144 grams of apple juice would be 15 grams of sugar. But people don't just drink 144 grams of apple juice. They drink 8 ounces, which is 248 grams in weight and 24 grams in sugar, which is only 2 grams less than a cup of Coca-Cola. Now, it doesn't take much processed food and drinks to overwhelm the gut, which should be protecting your liver. It's easy to overconsume liquid calories. Now, when you eat an apple, it takes 40 minutes to digest this apple. So The 6 grams of fructose in this apple is spread out over 40 minutes. That's 0.15 grams of fructose per minute, which allows your gut time to digest some of that fructose. Now, when you eat or drink added fructose, like soda, Coca-Cola, or Pepsi, you are drinking at least 39 grams of added fructose, and you can drink that in 5 minutes. So you are drinking 8 grams of fructose per minute. A serving of apple juice, which has 24 grams of fructose, can also be guzzled down in 5 minutes. Do you see the difference between a chewable, high fiber, hydrating food like fresh fruits versus drinks? Now, the problem with added sugar goes way beyond your drink. It's hidden in sauces, bakery items, desserts, protein bars, cereals. These items easily pack in the sugar to make you overeat. Roughly 60 pounds of added sugar a year. That's 6 bowling balls worth of added sugar. Where do you expect that extra weight to go? If you don't use it up, those extra calories get stored as fat in your liver, as fat in your muscle, and as fat in your fat cells. Now, when I eat fruit, I'm actually not eating it for its sugar. There is so little sugar that I would lose weight if I only ate fruit. Fresh whole fruits are low-calorie foods. This is not the same as eating fruit leather, fruit gummies, fruit chews, fruit cups, fruit pies. I mean, it's endless the amount of processing that we can do to a fruit. These items are not whole fruits. These have been processed with added sugar or added fat. Fruit juice is also another form of added sugar. You're basically eating candy if you're seeking processed food with added sugar. And anyone who eats fruit-flavored candy, they understand there is no way that it can replicate the flavors, aromas, and textures and health benefits of a real, fresh, whole fruit. Now, I eat fruit for its phytonutrients that are unique to those fruits, and it just so happens a little bit of fructose is there naturally. Many popular keto and carnivore social media influencers have changed their minds about fruits, and they now are eating some. It's not that the fruit has changed, but they have changed their opinions, and they're yo-yoing with fad diets.
There are multiple studies showing that fruit, and this is sacrilege, fruit juice, are beneficial for humans at many levels.
There's a plethora of data that shows carbs can aid performance. I mean, that is undeniable, right? In my book, The Carnivore Diet, I specifically say humans are omnivores. And I also think, you would have clearly come across fruit. You would have eaten that. I think that's undeniable. Now,
I'm here with my daily supply of bananas to tell you guys why I eat fruit. It's simply the best way to get carbohydrates.
Now, you can make up any diet and convince yourself it's healthy, but you can't fool your metabolism and the basic foundation of health, the building blocks of your fortress, your body. We are all made out of the same material. When you cut yourself, you bleed like everyone else. And when you need to heal that wound, you will need the same building blocks. Your body is undergoing constant stress from many factors that you can't control, like breathing and air pollution, to factors you can control, like exercise and eating. Now, these normal activities add inflammation to your life. A finite amount of controlled inflammation is actually very good, but it needs to go away. Does air pollution ever go away? At least 7 million people die from air pollution every year. And when you eat anthocyanin-rich fruits, you are reducing inflammation in your body, counteracting that pollution. These phytonutrients interact directly with your cells. Indirectly, your microbiome is also able to metabolize them into anti-inflammatory molecules. That's like getting a discount at the store and then finding a coupon to save even more. These anthocyanins are found within the fiber fruits packed in the skin and seeds. And when you take fiber supplements, these beneficial compounds, they're just not there. And when you heat up and cook the fruit, they also get lost. Now, I have lots of friends who have fruit trees in their backyard. They have so much fruit that they want to save it by making jams and preserves. Now, I once went to a raspberry farm and picked buckets of fresh raspberries, and my neighbor taught me how to make raspberry preserves. I've never eaten anything better than that in a preserve. It was delicious, but I was essentially eating candy. The worst thing that I did with those fruits was to add sugar to preserve them. I essentially turned a healthy, anti-inflammatory longevity food into a metabolic time bomb that causes fatty liver. In hindsight, freezing them would have been the best alternative. Believe it or not, sugar by itself isn't the root cause of fatty liver. The process needs a lighter. And up to 95% of people with type 2 diabetes have fatty liver, but only about half of those with type 1 diabetes have fatty liver. So why the difference? To understand the difference, you have to understand insulin and the root cause of insulin resistance, which is not really sugar. Insulin is an essential hormone you need to live. Now, if you don't have insulin, you won't grow. If you have too much insulin, you grow too big. You'll get morbidly obese. You'll have fatty liver. Insulin makes your fat cells store more fat and makes your liver cells store more fat too. But it makes your muscle cells store more sugar. People with type 1 diabetes, they can't make insulin. Their pancreas is sick and it stopped working. Only pancreatic beta cells make insulin. Can you believe that your pancreas weighs less than a D battery, less than 0.2 pounds? Without the pancreas, you cannot digest fat or sugar, and therefore you would not be able to survive. Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer, and you would think that one of the richest men who transformed our world, inventing cutting-edge technology, could have been saved. But even he succumbed to the top 10 most common causes of cancers in both men and women. Pancreatic cancer is on the rise, and here are the risk factors. And you may notice that pesticides are on the list. It's really the cumulative risk of pesticides that include these three. And some pesticides and herbicides that have been banned for over 30 years are still found in the environment and gets trapped in fat cells of people and of animals. Now, people focus on plants that are treated with pesticides and herbicides as a food to avoid, the dirty dozen as they call it. I have nothing against avoiding pesticide and herbicide sprayed foods. And honestly, I try my very best to do that whenever possible. But if you're eating fast food and restaurant foods, they're not avoiding pesticides or herbicides. The thing is, these pesticides and herbicides, they collect in the environment. It's like the story of mercury and the contamination of our ocean life. It's harder to get mercury poisoning from eating anchovies because they are tiny fish that don't live very long. It's easier to get toxic levels of mercury by eating big fish like shark and swordfish because they live a long time. They eat a lot of food and they collect mercury in their tissue. So animals and people do the same thing. These toxins are collected in fat cells. The bigger the animal, the more they eat, the longer they live, and the more toxins they have in their fat. That's another reason why animal fat is toxic to humans. But the thing is, we don't know what exactly causes pancreatic cancer, but we do know that losing weight around the abdomen and visceral fat will lower the risk of pancreatic cancer as well as fatty liver because it's simply all one system. There is no way to liposuction that fat out. The key to reducing fatty liver and obesity and cancers is to get insulin sensitive. Now, if you choose the wrong diet, you may reduce your fatty liver and your obesity, but you may not be reducing your risk of cancers. And you may be wondering what insulin sensitivity means. Have you ever used a really sensitive mouse where you barely touch it and you've accidentally changed the screen on your computer? You want your insulin receptors to be just like that, so sensitive that you can use the least amount of insulin to do a good job. Insulin is a bellhop for your sugar. Insulin rings your muscle cells and holds open the door for sugars to flow from your blood into your muscle cells. But when you are insulin resistant, the muscle doors get jammed. And no matter how many bellhops you hire, there's no way to get in. As a result, glucose backs up in your blood and your pancreas works harder to make more insulin, thinking that that is the solution. This is called insulin resistance. Remember, high insulin means more fat in your liver. That means you have more triglycerides. The insulin door is basically stuck. My garage door got stuck last year. We even took the lock apart, but we couldn't figure out how to get the lock mechanism to turn. We were doing the wrong things. Now, if you don't fix what is jamming the insulin door, then you won't reverse insulin resistance. Now, how does that insulin door get jammed? You will be surprised to learn that it's not sugar, but it's jammed by saturated fat. Now, this study will illustrate what I mean. They measured insulin resistance by testing how people without diabetes responded to nutrients. This paper split 23 male medical students to 4 groups with 4 diets. Group 1 got a high-quality diet with lean meats and egg whites. Group 2 got a high-fat diet with oil, mayonnaise, cream, and butter. Group 3, they got nothing to eat and fasted for 2 days. And Group 4 got a high-carbohydrate diet with oats, brown rice, potatoes, fruit, bread, syrup, candy, and pastries. Pretty much mostly junky low-fat carbs. Then all 4 groups were given a sugar challenge after just 2 days, known as a glucose tolerance test. This is how we diagnose gestational diabetes. Without a sugar challenge, you won't know if you have insulin resistance. And look at this graph. The people who ate nothing and fasted, they had the highest glucose levels, followed by the people who ate fat. And surprisingly, the people who ate the highest carbohydrate diet had the best blood sugars. And this was only 2 days. Now, based on this graph, eating a high saturated fat diet for just 2 days can make you super insulin resistant. The good news is it takes just 2 days to start reversing that insulin resistance too. Now, this doesn't intuitively make any sense. Even my brother, who has a PhD from Harvard in biochemistry, believed sugar would induce the highest sugar response. Now, intuitively, we all think eating sugar is a cause of insulin resistance. And this is because we are eating too much added sugar, which results in excess calories that get converted to fat, and hence elevated triglycerides. So when you eat too many calories, no matter the source, those calories get easily converted into saturated fat, and they're transported and stored as triglycerides. The bottom line is that saturated fat can be eaten or made by excessive ingestion of calories. They're both toxic. Now, this is toxic to the mitochondria, the energy generating hub for both fat and sugar that live in your muscles and liver. Now, do you have an unleaded gas or electric car? Now, most cars use only one form of energy. But if you have a hybrid car, then you have a car that has the ability to go back and forth between electric and gas. What if your car uses both when you drive at the same time? Wouldn't that be a waste of energy? Your body is the same way. It doesn't want to waste energy, so it will not use both fat and sugar at the same time. The presence of one shuts the other off. Now, between fat and sugar, your body prefers sugar. Sugar gives quick energy, which allows you to run away from a tiger or lion. And that's why professional athletes carb load before athletic events. Now, the first time I had to fill up gas at a gas station by myself, this was several decades ago. I put too much gas in the gas tank and it spilled over. That was pretty scary. I basically wasted some gasoline and accidentally polluted the environment. My tank was just too full. Now, when you overeat calories like sugar, you will overfill your sugar warehouse, your muscles, and then no further glucose will be stored. That spillover of surplus sugar will trigger 3 things. Number 1, that sugar will stick to proteins and cells to change how your cells communicate with one another. Now, have you ever spent a lot of time writing an essay and then spilled water all over that piece of paper and now you can't even read it? Now, if you've ever spilled sugar on your keyboard, you know that the keys are going to get stuck and they're no longer going to type well. This is what happens to your metabolism and your immune system when you have excess sugar. You basically put your cells into a food coma, unable to read each other's messages, which makes you susceptible to infections and cancers. When your hemoglobin A1C is high, your body is overwhelmed with sugar. But before this happens, you will start peeing out sugar and have frequency of urination, which is number 2. You will pee a lot and you will get up in the middle of the night and pee. You will pee so much that you will be dehydrated and excessively thirsty, which further weakens your immune system. These are some of the first symptoms of uncontrolled blood sugars or diabetes. Now, if this is you, go see a medical doctor. The third thing that happens even before you have symptoms is that your sugar will be stored as saturated fat. This is because when you have high blood sugars, your body will secrete more insulin to try to get your muscles to react. Now, your muscles may be insulin resistant because it's reached its storage limit kind of like my gas tank. But your fat cells don't have a storage limit. They have an unlimited capacity to store energy. And that's why sumo wrestlers have existed for thousands of years. And when you have elevated insulin and triglycerides, that's confirmation that you have fatty liver and that you are storing fat in the wrong places. When you eat saturated fat, it turns off your carbohydrate metabolism. So the more fat you eat, the worse your carbohydrate metabolism becomes. But you don't have to eat saturated fat to make fat. You just need to overeat calories. And this is why the worst diet of all, overeating the omnivorous, high-fat, high-carb, added sugar, added fat diet. And these are some of the reasons why French fries, potato chips, tortilla chips, and donuts are the worst ingredients to combine in a meal. But eating bacon strips with waffles smothered in syrup aren't any better. Neither is eating plain bacon strips. In fact, it may be worse because bacon has a bunch of carcinogens like nitrates, nitrosamines, and salt. And then it also has a ton of saturated fat. Quite a few people make comments on my videos that ancient humans, they ate a lot of meat, including fat. Now, some cultures did. Those are the ones who lived in the really cold places and they ate a lot of seafood, like the Inuits. But they didn't live very long. And many ancient cultures, they died by 40 years of age. And that's your goal, then honestly, it doesn't really matter what you eat. Because if your goal is to live until 40, you could basically just about anything to make that happen. But if your goal is to live longer than ancient civilizations, following cultures who didn't live long probably isn't the best idea. Ancient cultures, they didn't get obese eating high saturated fat diets, not just because they didn't have access to processed foods. These cultures also didn't have access to cars, elevators, smartphones, and food apps. They walked easily 20 to 25 miles a day. Are you doing that? I'm not doing that. I'm struggling to meet my basic 10,000 steps a day. Now, saturated fat takes a 1-2 punch to your metabolism. First, by building up intracellular lipid intermediates that are toxic, such as diacylglycerols and ceramides that not only contribute to liver insulin resistance, but they also cause necrosis and inflammation and death of the liver tissue. Now, this is a perfect recipe for fatty liver, elevated liver enzymes, chronic inflammation, fibrosis, and cirrhosis. And when you become cirrhotic, the only option is a liver transplant, which is really hard to get and potentially even harder to maintain. Now, hence, this is why it's important to choose the right type of nutrients as your energy source. You have to pick one, carbohydrates or fat. People who eat a high carbohydrate diet are plant-based communities, but they are not thin unless they control their calories or they're eating a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet. Now, people who eat high-fat diets target ketones for energy, but they also don't stay skinny unless they keep carbohydrates extremely low and protein extremely low. This is because protein also stimulates insulin secretion. The presence of insulin turns off ketone production or fat burning. There's another way to turn off fat burning. Remember how I explained your body conserves energy by not processing both carbohydrates and fat at the same time? The same concept applies for fat. Now, when you eat fat, there's no need for your body to break down its own fat. You've already eaten it. So if you want to lose weight in fat, you have to eat less fat and make less fat. Now, most people understand that we can see how high your blood sugars are for the last 3 months by checking a protein called hemoglobin A1C. Remember, when you spill excess sugar, it sticks to proteins, and that's why your hemoglobin A1C accumulates until the protein gets recycled. But before we see the elevated sugar, if we tested your blood, we will actually see high insulin levels. So a fasting insulin level is a more sensitive marker to find people who have prediabetes. Ask your medical doctor to check for your fasting insulin. If you have an elevated insulin above 10, you're either pre-diabetic or you have type 2 diabetes. And if you don't have insulin, but you have high blood sugars, then you have type 1 diabetes. Now, many people lose weight by keeping their carbohydrates low to none, like the ketogenic diet. But are they really improving their insulin resistance? The answer is yes and no. In the short run, due to weight loss, the insulin resistance improves. And when you lose weight, no matter how you do it, whether you eat or not, you lower your insulin levels because you're not eating as much sugar to require insulin. And this will improve your metabolic parameters. But can you keep your weight off and your insulin low when you eat sugar? Weight loss, like normal blood sugars, may not mean you've cured your insulin resistance problem. Fad diets work because you simply eat less food. And if the diet food isn't tasty, then that's easier to eat less food. And just in case you didn't know, if you don't eat any carbohydrates, your body still needs glucose and it will break down your muscle because you store glucose in the form of glycogen in your muscles. Glucose is needed 24/7. You don't have to eat it, but you do have to make it to supply certain cells with glucose. Now, losing muscle is obviously not what people should do, but when you're undergoing rapid weight loss, are you trading in one problem for another? Now, people who are overweight are basically eating both carbohydrates and fats in every meal. So you can reduce your calories on your own or with the help of GLP-1 agonists, and you will lose weight. But if you're eating the standard American diet, you're eating 30% fat. That's going to translate into inhibition of your carbohydrate metabolism to contribute to high insulin levels and persistent fatty liver and weight gain. So really doing nothing is not an option if you want to reverse fatty liver. Now, you still may not believe that eating a high-fat diet doesn't reverse insulin resistance. And you can prove this to yourself. Eat some sugar and see how high your sugar rises. We give people 50 grams of glucose called a glucose tolerance test to see if people can't metabolize carbohydrates appropriately. Unfortunately, eating high fat gives the body several blows in carbohydrate metabolism. Besides the harmful toxic metabolites of saturated fat, you also lose the best metabolic buffer, your muscles. And you can see this by yourself, just by measuring your calf muscles. Check the size before your diet and then check the size after. This is not what you want to shrink because your muscles help you store more sugar. And that's how you get insulin sensitive. You have to open that door. So if you've been on a prolonged high-fat ketogenic diet, you will probably over time lose abdominal belly fat simply because you're eating less food. And that will temporarily improve your metabolic parameters, simply because you're eating less calories. But eventually, if you ever want to go back to eating carbohydrates, you're going to need to retrain your body to tolerate those carbohydrates. And unfortunately, by avoiding carbohydrates, you actually become more insulin resistant because saturated fat is the real cause of insulin resistance. And when you don't eat carbohydrates, you will simply not see the problem. That's because if you don't eat sugar, you don't need any insulin to control your sugars, and you're not going to see spikes in sugar since you're not adding it to your body. Your body has very little sugar reserves, unlike the reserves of fat. And this is why eating more fruit and reducing fat in your diet will actually help to improve your insulin sensitivity. And it also reduces fatty liver. But eating fruit alone isn't healthy. It's supposed to be a part of a healthy diet. Now, there's one simple solution to reduce fatty liver, and this is to avoid calorie-dense processed foods with added sugar and added processed carbohydrates like refined flours, for example, bread, pastas, and pastries, that not only get literally converted to sugar, but those foods don't taste good unless you add enough salt, sugar, and fat. This is a recipe to create calorie-dense foods. Even a tiny Mrs. Field nibbler will pack on fat directly into your liver because of the added sugar and then the added fat. One Costco cookie has 16 grams of added sugar and 4 grams of saturated fat. Now, you would have to eat 1/5 of the cookie to not have it overwhelm your liver. Really, who can eat just a little bite of a cookie? It's been known since the 1950s that few people don't finish a cookie. I don't think I've ever just eaten half a cookie or had any leftovers of a cookie. Now, usually I'm trying to find crumbs. What's even worse is that table sugar breaks down into glucose and fructose. Fructose is converted to triglycerides inside your liver cells, and then it gets stuck. So it speeds up fatty liver, insulin resistance, and weight gain. But I already explained why the little bit of fructose in fruit, it doesn't do that. In fact, people who eat high amounts of fruits without added sugar, they lose more weight, they lower their cholesterol, and they improve their insulin sensitivity better than those who don't eat the fruit. Now, this is not the same as drinking fruit juice, which is slightly better than just eating sugar water. Now, be careful of dried fruit because they often add sugars, either straight sucrose or even worse, fruit juice, which seems to contradict the purpose of juice, which is to drink it as a beverage. When you add fruit juice, you're essentially adding sugar. When you eat fruit, you will see a sugar spike after eating fruit. If you don't see that sugar spike, then you should really be concerned that you're not absorbing nutrients. So the spike of sugar is actually normal. Everybody's sugar spike will be at a different level depending on how insulin resistant they are. But your sugar should increase after you eat glucose. The duration of which the sugar stays elevated is actually more important than the peak of the elevation. And when you eat a cookie, it will not only spike your sugar, but that sugar will stay higher for a longer period of time. Now, this is because that added cookie sugar comes with saturated fat, as well as highly refined starches that then turn into glucose, which all keeps your sugar persistently elevated. Now, people with diabetes are instructed to check their blood sugars 2 hours after meals. Unless they're pregnant, then that should be 1 hour after meals. And this is also why it's a bad idea to eat fat with sugar. Now, in the short term, people with insulin resistance will have prolonged blood sugar elevation whenever they eat glucose. The worse your insulin resistance, the higher your glucose in your blood. Now, people who are very insulin resistant will struggle in the beginning to eat certain whole fruits that have more sugar, like grapes. But as their insulin resistance improves from removing foods with high saturated fat, they will be able to tolerate more whole fruits. This is why it's important to swap your refined flour foods to whole grains, like Avena Sativa, which is the common oat. Eating oats daily has been shown to lower cholesterol, fatty liver, weight, and blood sugar. Some people don't like oats because it's slimy. That sliminess is soluble fiber, which serves as a sieve to prevent cholesterol from being recycled back into your body. Now, you may be on a grain-free diet. I'm just saying there are nutrients that are unique to grains, including soluble fiber and phytonutrients attached to those fibers that are beneficial for health. Those who don't eat whole grains or are eating refined grains are really missing out. There are several kinds of oats in the store. Quick oats have the highest glycemic index, so it's the least healthy since it's the most processed. Rolled oats are better with lower glycemic index. The glycemic index tell you how fast the food will increase your blood sugars compared to white bread, which is 100. Steel-cut oats would be even better as we're getting closer to the original grain. Oat groats are the best as it is the whole grain. And when you cook oats, you will notice it's viscous, slimy, and sticky. That means when you eat that, you are creating a buffer between your body and the blood sugars and fats and proteins so that they are slowly released in your bloodstream. In addition, the prebiotic fiber in oats feed beneficial microbes in your gut called lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, and Akkermansia, which in turn make beneficial anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Now, number 5 is coffee. People exposed to liver toxins like alcohol, cigarettes, and hepatitis C virus appear to benefit from drinking coffee. Alcoholics who drank 2 cups of coffee daily can reduce their risk of liver cancer by 50%. Now, if you smoke, drinking twice as much coffee or 4 or more cups a day can reduce your risk of liver cancer too. Coffee appears to be beneficial for those with hepatitis C virus as well. But coffee by itself is not enough to reverse the damage from alcohol, cigarettes, and hepatitis C virus. So ideally, the greatest benefit is not to get those exposures from those toxins. However, I can't deny that drinking coffee has been shown to reduce oxidative DNA damage, increase the death of infected viral liver cells, reduce fibrosis, and this all decreases the risk of liver cancer. Now remember, see your medical doctor if you have hepatitis C because there is a cure now for hepatitis C virus. Now, if you drink the wrong coffee, you can increase your cholesterol by 10% because it contains fats called cafestol and colwiol. The best way to avoid elevated cholesterol is to make sure all the coffee goes through a paper filter. Just by paper filtering your coffee, you eliminate 95% of the cafestol. Lighter and medium roasted coffee also has twice as much cholesterol-raising fats as darker roasted beans. So non-paper filtered coffees like boiled, French press, and Turkish coffee, and even espresso can elevate your cholesterol. Percolated and instant coffee both have a pretty low effect on cholesterol, even without paper filters. Now keep in mind, even paper filtered high cafestol coffee can significantly increase your cholesterol if you already have high cholesterol. So if you have high cholesterol, try to drink low caffeine coffees, which will be darker roasted beans. Now make sure it's coarsely ground and always drink it through a paper filter. Now if that doesn't work, then consider drinking less coffee and giving coffee up altogether and change your drink to tea. Most people think of cholesterol as a metric of heart disease, but it's also a metric of liver health. Now, your cholesterol number can significantly change with your diet. And most fad diets cannot keep 3 metabolic parameters normal unless you're barely eating. And that's why low-carb people get high ApoB cholesterol. And people who eat lots of refined foods have all of them abnormal. Now, millions of people, they watch popular social media internet gurus who claim that they figured out how to hack your blood sugars so you can eat whatever you want, or tell you to enjoy your meat and fats despite seeing elevated ApoB cholesterol. But does it really help with living healthy and living longer? Because if your goal is to live to 40 like ancient cultures, then this whole conversation is a moot point. If you look at the population data in the United States, I would say not. We are getting sicker earlier and we're dying younger. And many of these popular fad dieters, they have succumbed to the same chronic metabolic diseases that we're all trying to prevent. So if you want to take a deep dive on whether or not you need to reduce your ApoB cholesterol or your triglycerides, watch the next video.